Alone in the cabin. The wind howled through the dense forest, carrying with it a bone-chilling cold that seared into every crack and crevice of the isolated cabin. Jane huddled by the crackling fireplace, clutching a worn blanket tightly around her shivering frame. She had come to this remote retreat seeking solitude, but now in the dead of night she couldn't help but feel the oppressive weight of her isolation. The cabin, nestled deep within the woods, was miles away from the nearest town. Jane had been drawn to its rustic charm and the promise of a respite from the chaos of city life. Yet, as the darkness outside deepened, her sense of isolation grew more profound. The cabin's solitary existence had become a haunting reality, and the woods that had once seemed inviting had taken an eerie, malevolent quality. Jane tried to reassure herself that it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. The creaking of the old timbers and the rustling of the leaves against the window panes was the only sounds of nature, she told herself, but then she heard it, a faint whispering voice carried on the wind. She strained to listen, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice was barely audible, like a distant echo, yet it seemed to carry a desperate urgency. Jane couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, an eerie, mournful plea for help. A shiver ran down her spine as she realized there was no one for miles. No one should be out there calling for help in the middle of the night. The rational part of her mind argued that it was probably just the wind playing tricks on her ears, but her instincts screamed otherwise. With trembling hands, Jane decided to investigate. She wrapped the blanket around herself and ventured into the inky darkness of the forest. The floorboards groaned beneath her every step, as if protesting her inclusion into the forest's secret world. As she stepped onto the porch, the frigid night air bit into her skin. The voice grew clearer, a tortured whisper that seemed to be coming from deep within the forest. Against her better judgment, Jane followed the sound, guided only by the moon's feeble glow. The forest around her was a labyrinth of twisted branches and looming shadows. Each step felt like a descent into madness. As the voice continued to beckon her forward, panic threatened to overtake her, but she pressed on, her breath misting in the cold. Finally, she stumbled upon a clearing, and there, bathed in the eerie light of the moon, she saw it. A dilapidated, long-forgotten cemetery. The tombstones were weathered and overgrown with ivy, and among them a shadow knelt, its back to her. The figure was unmistakably human, but it emitted an otherworldly aura as if it belonged to the realm of the dead. Jane approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. As she drew closer, the figure slowly turned to face her, and her blood ran cold. It was the ghostly visage of a woman, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. She raised a translucent hand toward Jane, her voice now a haunting lament. "Help me," the ghostly figure implored. Terror seized Jane as she realized that the voice she'd heard was the wailings of this tormented soul, trapped between worlds. She stumbled backwards, unable to tear her eyes away from the ghostly figure. In the moment, Jane understood the true horror of her isolation. She was not alone at the cabin, nor in the woods. She was surrounded by the restless spirits of the forgotten, and there was no escape from their mournful cries. As the ghostly figure reached out to her, Jane screamed, the sound echoing through the haunted forest. The wind carried her cries into the night, trapping them in the old floorboards of the cabin, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurk in the darkness, waiting to be heard by those who dared be alone in the cabin.